Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Hong Kong Confidential is brought to you by Teresa's Turkish Towels. Teresa imports the finest 100% Turkish cotton towels that dry very quickly, making them perfect for Hong Kong's humid climate. Say goodbye to the traditional smelly and stinky towels and try the colourful and fresh selections available online or in Teresa's Wan Chai store. Use the promo code CONFIDENTIAL online or mention this podcast when you visit in person to receive $100 off your entire order when you order 2 or more towels. With 100% satisfaction guaranteed or your money back, the only thing you've got to lose are the musty smells that permeate traditional terry towels. Visit www.hkturkish.com in order to get the address and directions to Teresa's semi-hidden location. Today I'm here with Christina. Hi Christina, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Christina, are you native to Hong Kong or are you a local Hong Kong person?
Depends. Personally, I don't consider myself native, but however, I was born and my first 10 years of life was spent in Hong Kong.
And then where did you go?
New Zealand.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then New York. And then, unfortunately, back to Hong Kong.
Oh, why do you say unfortunately back to Hong Kong?
At that point, I graduated from college from New York. And the naive young me thought, oh, exciting. I want to go back to Hong Kong and make some money and have fun. So 20 years onwards, I don't really like Hong Kong anymore.
Oh, wow. That's sad. Why?
Hong Kong's very depressing.
Oh, interesting. And that's why we're here today. We're here to talk about depression. Can you tell me a little bit, first of all, about your childhood and what sort of child were you as you grew up?
Okay. I think my childhood, I'll break it down to 2 main parts. My first part, the earlier part spent in Hong Kong, I was brought up in a very traditional family. My parents were much, much older than me. They were the really old school Chinese parents, like tough love in a way, the Chinese tough love, like never expressing their emotions, never positive reinforcement, no compliments whatsoever, always be humble and all that. I would say my first part of the childhood, all I can remember was being told to be a good girl.
And what does that mean to be a good girl in Chinese culture?
It could mean all sorts of things. First of all, it could mean finishing your meal. It could mean doing the dishes. It could mean getting top grades in school, or it could just simply mean walk straight line. Anything and everything in the old Chinese parenting method is just tell your kids to be good.
And did you feel much love and tenderness from your parents, or was it just very much pressure to be good?
Let's put it that way. I never experienced unconditional love when I was really young because I thought I had to earn my love.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. Maybe that wasn't intentional. It was just the way they were brought up. A lot of time I felt I had to be good in order to be, not even love, in order to be entitled to be near my parents.
Oh.
Yeah.
And how does that affect a young girl?
I was always striving to be better. I didn't have any self-confidence. Well, I would say my self-esteem was really, really low. And I wasn't much of a child. Due to my unique family situation, I was trying to be an adult since I was like in kindergarten.
What do you mean by your unique family situation?
Okay, I know my name is on this, but I'm not sure if anyone knows me would listen, but all my friends know my background anyway. My parents, my dad had another wife before my mom. They had 8 kids. My mom had me out of wedlock. I never really spent time with my dad. It was more like once a month lunch. It wasn't until I was at 5 or 6 years old that I found out about my other siblings. I found out in a really interesting way. My dad kind of asked me, "Oh, do you want some brothers and sisters?" Being a kid, wanting playmates, I said, "Sure." And that weekend, he brought me to meet my much older siblings.
Oh my gosh, how was that for you?
Not that much fun because all my siblings were really traditional as well. The oldest one could be my mother. The youngest one was at least 6 years older than me. And they kind of parented me as well. So it was a really odd kind of situation. Like I spent most of my days and time with my mom. And on weekends, I would spend some time with my dad, my siblings, and also my paternal grandma then. I was always told to be even better when I'm with them. Like my mom kind of spoiled me when I was little, but not spoiled in the sense of nowadays with love and dovey and compliments. It was spoiling by I can get whatever ice cream I want, I can get whatever food I want, but it was lack of physical or emotional love. But anyway, so it was a big contrast between time with mom and time with my dad and my other siblings. Anyway, to make the long story short, when I was young, I was always asked by my mom or told by my mom that I have to be good and be nice so that I don't bring shame on the family and onto her, and that I have to look after her. Well, not so much I have to look after her, but my mom would kind of ask, "Oh, Christina, what should we do?" Like to a 4-year-old. It was really hard because I was very, very attached to my mom. As you can tell from my experience of living with my mom mostly for the first 10 years of my life, I was really, really protective of my mom. So even since I was really young, I felt I had to raise to the challenge and protect my mom from my dad. Like, he wasn't abusive, but he was really, really, really traditional, male chauvinistic kind of like, never smile, never have a good word for anyone.
Very serious, was he?
He was a school principal. Like the real school principal in the good old days, like never smile, very stern face, like just a look from him is enough to silence any child.
Did you feel scared of him?
Yes. I can remember when we were young, sometimes my dad might come home like every now and then unannounced. And that's where my mom and me, we kind of scrap to put anything that we know he doesn't like. Like, my mom likes to play mahjong, which is a game in Hong Kong.
Oh, yeah, I know mahjong. I love playing mahjong.
Oh,
yeah,
great. We can
play it, yeah.
Yeah. So, although my dad plays it too, but he disapproves of other people playing. So, she would hide those, and I would pretend to be sleeping earlier. It was really, I would say, I don't know about other people's childhood, but for me, it wasn't a very structured, it wasn't disciplined. It was not too happy of a childhood. All I can remember growing up was the 3 words, Christina, be good. And that kind of stuck with me until the time I moved to New Zealand.
When did you realise that you had depression?
It wasn't so much termed as depression then. This was back in the 1980s. It was when I moved to New Zealand. We lived with my auntie and uncle. My uncle was a doctor. And every now and then I would get sick. As in, like, have no motivation and, like, just have pains and aches everywhere. At first, they thought it might be migraine, it might be this, or maybe that. And after a few checks with my uncle and also other specialists, finally someone said, maybe you should get the child to talk to someone, because they couldn't really find anything physically wrong with me. And that's when I got in touch with my first counselor.
How old were you?
I was about 12.
It's good that you were getting support that young then.
Yes, actually, I think the best thing that ever happened to me was moving to New Zealand when I was young, because I got the chance to experience a different form of childhood. Although I already felt I was already an adult because of my early rushing to be an adult kind of childhood.
Pressure to be good and pressure to be independent and mature.
Yes, and to protect my mom. But when I was about 12 or 13 in New Zealand, I started meeting regularly with this counselor who kind of just taught me through things. Oh, that's another thing in my childhood. It was okay to talk to my mom about what happens in school, who and who won't play with me, teachers said this and that. But it wasn't really much talking in terms of deep talking.
You weren't encouraged to talk about your feelings or your emotions?
No. Feelings are taboo in Chinese family.
Why is this?
Don't know. I think they don't have the experience on how to deal with it. It's too emotional. It's kind of like if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist.
It's sweep it under the carpet and it will go away kind of thing?
Exactly. Or actually, it goes both ways. It's not just the sad or the unhappy things. Even the happy things, you were told to tone down. You're supposed to be very kind of modest and stable and, kind of just flat.
Calm.
Yes, calm. No upsets, but no really happy neither.
I'm not sure why that's important in Chinese culture. Do you know?
No, actually, that's the part. Although my parents were very traditional, but my dad was the school principal, my mom was a teacher. They had all these traditional Chinese background with them, but for some reason, I never really picked it up. I consider myself more Kiwi.
All right, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I kind of sympathize with a lot of the Western culture where I felt I grew up. I picked up my most formative years. I felt I grew up in New Zealand. So that's where a lot of the ideas of what life is all about and all that. Oh, that's another thing. In Chinese family, you don't really teach your children as in life. At least in my family, I kind of felt like the only thing my mother ever taught me was to be good. Exactly how to be good, there was no special instructions on that. So a lot of things I kind of picked. I read a lot. Reading was also a big part of my life. Whatever materials that I got my hands on, TV, whatever, watching sitcoms and all that. So for me, it was very fortunate that I got to New Zealand where I was surrounded with more positive type of childhood in a way. But still, going through teenage years, as you know, can be problematic. Your body is changing. My family situation was changing. I was changing schools a couple of times because of the move from Hong Kong to New Zealand, and then changing school because their school system is 11 and 12. You go to intermediate school, and then Form 3 onwards, you go to what they call secondary school. It was that point when I started seeing this counselor where she would just talk and lead me to more positive thinking, I would say. That was the first time where I kind of felt it was okay to feel unhappy, okay to feel happy, okay to say that I am good already. It wasn't a very, how should I say, intervention kind of counseling. It was more just like a trusted adult who can talk to you. It's like an aunt a really kind aunt that would talk to the younglings.
And was that helpful for you?
Very, because
Right.
I felt for once that an adult actually approves of me. And that was very important to feel approved, I guess. For my personality anyway. Because
Is that because you didn't really feel like you had approval from your parents when you were younger?
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of it is to do with character as well. I can't say that for all Chinese kids.
Sure.
They go through this.
This is your experience.
Exactly. Throughout the 40 plus years of my life, I've done enough self-analyzing to understand that I'm kind of the person that is very critical of myself. I like to analyze a lot. And therefore, I kind of need a lot of validation from people because I second guess myself and second guess again.
I think that's human nature though, isn't it? Don't we all like to be validated?
Yes, I think so. But however, from all the books that I've been reading and also from my other friends who've now become parents, that I think nowadays kids are given that validation earlier in life to help them build confidence. And therefore, when they get to older,
They're
they
more
don't,
secure.
Exactly.
Yes, right.
They
That does make sense.
They feel more secure and therefore they need less validation. But due to my circumstances, I kind of grew up with zero or negative security. Therefore, I kind of seek endless security, endless need of validation throughout my life, both from work, from school, from friends. It kind of really troubled me, even during my teenage years where I felt I had to please everyone to be someone's friend.
What did that look like? How did you do that?
Bad.
What were you doing?
I was, I can't remember the day today, but if I have to sum up my early teenage years, I think I was one of those nerds that really want to hang on to being part of the crowd, that when people ask, what do you want to do? I will always say, oh, anything is okay. Just whatever you guys want to do, because I felt I had no right to choose, or I just want to get along with other people. And that kind of took up the early parts of my teenage years where I felt I didn't belong anywhere. And that even though I had good friends, but I continuously felt I had to be good to them in order for them to be my friends. And that was really, really hard. It wasn't until I was about 16 when on and off, I continued counseling. There's another thing I love about New Zealand school. They had an in-school counselor.
It's great, isn't it, to have that?
Because it could be someone just talking to you about problems at school, problem with family, problem with your friends, that you don't feel judged. That's another thing. When I used to talk to my parent, well, actually never to my dad, just my mom, I always felt judged. It was always constantly, if something bad happened to you, you must have done something wrong. That's how I was brought up. If anything bad happens to you, you must have done something wrong.
Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at things.
Yes, actually, that's detrimental to my character because even now, if something bad happens to me, kind of instinctively, the first thing I look at is, in a way, they teach that as a good virtue. Is that for you to be humble? If something goes wrong, first you look introspectively to see what you've done wrong. In a way, yes, is a good virtue, but too much of it, you become a doormat. That's exactly what I was first part of my teenage years. I wouldn't say my friends took advantage of me, but it was, hey, everybody was a teenager. Teenagers can be brutal. I would say that I don't have much happy memories till I was about 16 when I kind of developed that, hey, I can choose. I actually have a choice. I can say no. If I don't want to see this movie, I can tell them. I don't have to say yes to everything. And that's kind of very, very dramatic change of me in my life.
Do you think, looking back, that you had depression throughout all of your childhood, or did it just develop in your teens?
I think I do, because jump forward a bit, I was officially diagnosed with clinical depression right after my wedding. I got married in 2010 when I was about, 36? Make the long story short, I got married in New Zealand with my husband, and we got back to Hong Kong when I was working. I was in the midst of my career, very busy, and then I had this pain in my belly. I went for a checkup, and I found out I had a reoccurred ovarian cyst. I've had that before, but it was the last straw because I was already very stressed out by work, very stressed out by family, by marriage, by everything, and that's when I had my first breakdown. And then that's when I used to go on and off, even in Hong Kong when I got back to Hong Kong to start work. I've been to St. John's counselling, on and off counsellor.
They're great.
They're great. I know some people might think in the old days, why would you pay for someone just to listen? Why does everybody have a shrink? Is that an American thing? But for me, I kind of felt it was a great outlet for me to feel unjudged, unburdened. I can just spill the beans and I get positive advice. It might not be giving me direct instructions of what I need to do, but they give me coping skills. But anyway, right after my wedding, got back, about a month into that, I was diagnosed with a recurring ovarian cyst, and I kind of broke down from that. I remember sitting in the cab, just coming back from the doctor's office, going back to the ferry for Discovery Bay, and I kind of called my best friend and I told her about what happened. I kind of just remember spilling out the words, why? Why me? Why is God doing this to me? Oh, by the way, I'm a Christian. So I just felt all hopes are gone. And why can't any good things happen to me? Only bad things.
Was this your lowest point?
At that point, yes.
That point, yeah.
At that point.
And was the trigger your ovarian cysts and the stress of moving back and getting married and all of that, or is it just random?
I think it's a build-up. I think everybody is like, it's a vessel. As in, they have a vessel and that everybody's got different capacity of how much volume of stress or, life they can take. Some people have better outlets to spill the beans and all that. Some people have blocked drains like I do. And I guess
that's a very nice analogy. That's great.
Yes. Yeah, I guess at that point I felt that was the feather that broke the camel's back. It was a tipping point. Also, about a couple of years ago in 2009, my brother, who just turned 40, died unexpectedly due to a heart condition. He left behind 2 young girls. And out of my dad's family, my dad is what they call an indigenous resident of Hong Kong. We are the Tang clan. So we are the village people. We had a lot of land. So in a way, he is rich. My dad is rich. Yes. He only has 2 sons and 7 daughters. So in the old village law, only the male can inherit any land or any property. And when my brother died, he left behind 2 young daughters. So we went through, of course, it was grief and loss, the funeral and all that. But the internal bickering started even before the funeral. Because my sister-in-law was very strong woman, very independent, and she was very westernized as well. So was my brother himself. If he had survived my father, I'm sure whatever he inherited, he would just give to his daughter. But because he died before he made the will, and because before he himself inherited anything, my family made my sister-in-law sign back anything that they had.
What?
It was the cars, the property, the house that they were living in. It wasn't that they said they wouldn't look after them, but they said they're not entitled to own anything because they're all girls.
So who did she have to sign it back to? The brother?
The brother. then, or my father was still alive then. I don't know how it ended up. I know they were going to court, but even before the funeral, it took about a month to arrange for the funeral because we had one of those elaborate Chinese funerals. I remember I was put in between because I was really grieving for my brother, and I was trying to help to support my sister-in-law and my two young nieces, who was 3 and 7. And I was caught in between because even the funeral arrangement, they were bickering. The family wanted to do it the traditional way. My sister-in-law wanted to do it the way my brother would have liked. And I was caught in between. There was a lot of we and you, her and them, you know.
It's crazy how families can just fall apart when there's a death and you've got a funeral to plan and then there's a will and inheritance. Everything can just go completely wrong, can't it?
Yes, and definitely, especially when there's different culture background involved. And also when there are monetary.
You mean different culture within your family?
Within my family.
Because the generations felt differently about how things should be done.
Exactly, because my family, being very traditional, believes what dad says goes, or traditional precedes what you want anyway. Whereas my sister-in-law, being not an indigenous resident and being more westernized, and my brother himself would have been the same way, would be more, well, it is your wedding, it's your funeral. I mean, it's your husband's funeral, right? You kind of feel like I want it in a more Western way, or it's just overall little things like that. Just, it doesn't help that at that point it was already you and I, even before he was laid to the ground, they were talking about the wills and the money and the lease.
And then that doesn't really allow people the space to grieve, does it?
No. And that was actually before my depression officially got diagnosed. But it really affected me because I felt like I was torn apart. And actually, the interesting thing was, at that point I found out my mother wasn't just the second woman in my father's life. He's already had a long-term girlfriend. Oh. And my mum knows about it. Actually, everybody knows about it except me.
You?
Yes.
How did that feel to be left out of that little bit of information?
I felt betrayed. I've always been scared of my father, and I never really approved of how he treats my mother. I never felt like I was a product of love. I felt I was a product of responsibility.
That's interesting because you were the other woman's daughter.
Yeah, so kind of normally that would be the love child, right?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't. I was the child that, that nobody wanted. I guess maybe that was the beginning or the prelude to my depression. And luckily, I got a 6-month contract to work in New Zealand. After my brother's...
So that was good for you.
That was good for me to break away.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. What did that breakdown look like? What actually happened to you?
So kind of at that point, I mean, even before that, I've had moments of downs and all that. And I was always able to bounce back, maybe after a good cry, after binging on, chips and candy, something like that. But that point, from that taxi ride back home, I can't remember the exact sequence of things, but I kind of remember waking up not feeling, don't want to go to work, kind of scared of lights, scared of sound, don't want to see anyone, don't want to say anything, don't want to do anything. It was getting to a point of a physical barrier to actually live. And that's when my husband took me to St. John's Counselling, made an urgent appointment to see my counsellor. And my counsellor saw me and kind of said, well, you need medication or you need some intervention. And that's when I officially signed up with a psychiatrist for medication.
Great. And how did that go?
It was really, really different because at that point, to be honest, I was immobile. I was completely unable to survive, especially not in Hong Kong. I remember leaving the house, being scared of the lights outside, being scared of the sounds outside, from traffic sounds to people sound to construction sounds, just any kind of sounds that were like squealing in my ears. And I was told by my doctor that that's all part of what they call the episode, the crisis. I was put on medication for the first time in my life, and I was put on some kind of counseling program. It was like every 3 days I'd go in for a session. and et cetera, et cetera. And then that continued until I had my operation to remove the ovarian cysts. And I had a very, very considerate employer at that point. I took time off. I got sick leave anyway because of the ovarian cyst, but I got time off for about a month and a half, 2 months. And I got very good counselor to help me, very great coping skills. And my husband was very, very supportive.
It sounds like you were really well looked after. So that's great to hear, considering some people are critical of the medical services in Hong Kong for mental health issues. What's your opinion on that?
I would say nowadays it's much better. There is a stigma, but not as bad as before. There is a bad term in Chinese, sometimes even my husband uses it, just jokingly, to say that your wires are messed up. That can go from psychotic to completely mad to just mentally unstable.
Crazy,
exactly,
isn't it? Yeah,
crazy. Exactly.
I recognize it.
Yes, and that's got a very bad connotation. However, nowadays I would think that although there is a stigma, but nowadays people do recognize depression as a disease rather than just something, get over it. Exactly. I mean, I know some people still do it. Still, maybe deep down they do think that. But however, nowadays, Hong Kong, a lot of people are trying to be politically correct. So whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But at least in front of me, they don't say it.
Do you think that that's because there's more exposure in the media and social media about mental health issues, or are people becoming better educated in some way? Why do you think things are improving?
I think in all aspects, it has been improving. Like you said, social media, a lot of celebrities who have fell to this disease, and people kind of express sympathy and a lot more educated information on the web. And also,
yes, the internet's been a great resource too, isn't it?
Yes,
well,
like my
it can
husband
be good
said,
or bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like gunpowder is good, it's just people who used it badly. But anyway, internet was great, as in it become more accessible to different sorts of knowledge that people can have about this disease. However, I don't think people truly understand what mental illness is like, because they can't tell the difference between depression, schizophrenia, to psychopath. To them, it's all something wrong with the brain. I was told by my doctor that I was clinically depressed, not just because of how I felt and what I experienced. It was something to do with my brain chemicals. That's why I was put on medication.
That's very common, isn't it? Because
Yes.
And then the medication helps change the chemicals in your brain and it lifts your mood.
Exactly. So it actually helped me to feel less guilty, because when I first kind of got that diagnosis, I kind of, being me, growing up, like if anything bad happens to you, it must be your fault. So I kind of felt bad for being depressed.
But you wouldn't feel bad if you had diabetes or broke your arm.
Oh,
Do you know?
actually, yes, because in my...
Still could be your fault.
Yes, you ate, you didn't have a good diet, you didn't exercise well enough.
Okay.
So a lot of it really depends on like how I was brought up. Even nowadays, my husband has this way of, if anything bad happens to me, you must have done something wrong. It's not the best, but in a way I do agree with him, because sometimes you are what you eat and you are what you do. If you live an unhealthy lifestyle, you would tend to have certain things.
I think my point is that people are more accepting or understanding of physical ailments, but they're not so accepting and understanding of mental health issues.
Exactly. But even physical ailments, I think Hong Kong has yet a long way to go on equal opportunity for all.
Yes, I had a friend who came for the Human Dignity Festival who was in a wheelchair, and she couldn't get around Hong Kong anywhere. It was so difficult. There's no accommodation made for people in wheelchairs, and it was really highlighted once there was someone there that I knew. People had to carry her in and out of everywhere in her chair.
I have experienced it personally because my mum now is very elderly, and whenever she goes out, we put her in a wheelchair. And I find it's so difficult to get her around. You have to spend extra money, extra time, extra effort. But that's what I think Hong Kong is, in a lot of ways, is all talk, but not much action. They all talk about being sympathetic to disability, to, we understand depression is just an illness, we have to be accommodating, blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to actual action, the government hasn't done a lot. A lot of government facilities are still not very accessible in terms of support for depression or mental illness. I mean, me personally, I've gone through it. I've had friends, I've had family members who've gone through it, the public system. It's not something that is helpful, but it's not very helpful. Like you get one visit every 3 months in the public hospital, and you get maybe up to 10 minutes with the doctor. I don't really see if someone is really truly unstable in their mental disease, how they can be spotted and how they can be maintained. But that's going off the point now.
Well, no, it's not, because I'd love to have your opinion on how Hong Kong could improve their facilities for people with mental health issues. What do you think we need here?
I think it's hard. I think Hong Kong medical or social welfare system right now is not a very comprehensive one. I'm glad that I was able to afford private care for early stages of my depression.
And I think that's what we're hearing, is that if you can afford private care, it's very, very good in Hong Kong. But if you need to have governmental care, then it's there and it's okay, but it's not often enough. There's waiting lists and it's just not as good as it could be.
Definitely. But then some people on the other side of the argument is we pay low taxes and that's why you can't afford to pay for everyone. Hong Kong system is already the best they can be, et cetera, et cetera.
But when you look at the fact that, I don't know if you were here a few years ago, they gave every resident $6,000 back on tax. Maybe that was 8 or 10 years ago or whatever. But if they'd put that money into mental health or even the health system, that would have been a massive amount of money. So there's so much money. This is a rich city.
Exactly. I mean, how many cities in the world have such a good surplus for year on year? But they keep saying that they have to be careful of how they spend, they can't promise too much. But then you see them go off and, 5 million was spent on the fireworks every month or something?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you just
it's priorities, isn't
exactly.
it? They're not prioritising mental health and a number of things. Homeless people, caged homes, public housing. There's a whole bunch of things that could be the focus of this surplus wealth that Hong Kong has.
My husband and I I was influenced by him on this theory. Is Hong Kong, because it was a colony, a lot of it was to do, British kind of install this elitism into the society where if you excel, you enjoy certain privileges. And therefore encouraging people to better themselves, to improve, to what we call upgrade yourself, right? And so that's kind of striving rather than like a communism, socialism where the state takes care of everyone. I think in a way, Hong Kong has a unique history. Like personally, I felt I don't belong anywhere, although I identify myself as Kiwi. But overall, I think a lot of Hong Kong people kind of felt like an orphan. Like we were the adopted poor orphans by British. Oh, right. And now we're kind of returned to our birth parent, but we don't feel like we can kind of associate or communicate with them, that we don't really like them or we don't like how they parent.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've never ever thought of that. That's so interesting though. So you really are a true third culture kid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like I kind of extended my personal belief into the wider belief of Hong Kongers. It's like, if you go through the history, Hong Kong was really left to shield for themselves. We never really enjoyed protection. We never really belonged to any country. So again, this is just my personal point of view, and also because of my strange background, that I kind of felt we were brought up feeling we were the adopted kids by British colony. We weren't living with them. We were part of them. We were educated by them. And then before we reached adulthood, we were told that, okay, now, we got to give you back to your birth parents.
Which is China.
They have a totally different culture. They have a total different way of parenting. And off you go. Bye. And then a lot of people were scared. That's why in the 1980s, there was an exodus of people immigrating to other places.
Because did they feel that if China took back Hong Kong, that life was going to change dramatically?
And also because at that point, a lot of people, let's say 1980s, there will be the parents of, at that point, like people who were in their 30s or 40s, might have experienced the Cultural Revolution. Same as my parents, they kind of escaped the communism from China to Hong Kong. So they have all these bad memories. I was told like, you were rich or you were a teacher, you have to kneel on broken glass. You were marched through the street to make an example of. People throw stones at you, like all these bad stories. It was then a lot of, whether they've experienced it themselves or experienced it from being told by their parents, that they were really afraid of communists. So they just wanted a safety net. That's why a lot of people left. But a lot of people came back though, because after 1997, it was a good projection to say nothing's really changed.
Nothing's changed.
It was even better in a way that the government wanted to project. Look now. wow, you have more access to the biggest market in the world. Look at China. So a lot of people came back. Then there were a lot of people who were called the astronauts, people who flew back, leaving their kids in overseas to study. The wife and the kids stayed behind. The dad came back to work because Hong Kong then was still quite booming. Great opportunities. That is the true, because when you're Chinese, if you move to overseas, opportunities might not be as good as others in Hong Kong.
Everything you're talking about really could affect people's identity or their sense of identity, couldn't it? Those people living in Hong Kong. And I wonder how much that has a knock-on effect into mental health issues. Do you have an opinion on that?
Personal opinion, yes. I guess it depends on the age group. I mean, nowadays, if you think of the millennials who turns 18 now, they probably don't remember anything. They have not been through the colonial days. So they might identify themselves as Chinese or Hong Kong, but nowadays, there's a lot of disputes, a lot of young people, radical young people. It may be because they've gone through various different projections of what they should feel. Some people are saying, you should be Chinese. Some people are saying, you should feel that you're part of Hong Kong. I definitely feel that because of the unique history of Hong Kong, people of all different age groups might have an identity issue. It really depends on their background. For me, because I did move away, I kind of feel like I'm a visitor to Hong Kong. Although I was born in Hong Kong, I feel I live here, I love Hong Kong, but I belong somewhere else. And that makes me much happier because I feel if all fails, I can still leave.
Would you like to go back to New Zealand?
Definitely. That's actually been on my plan for the last 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm just working towards it.
What keeps you here?
First of all, is financially. It is much easier to make money in Hong Kong. However, it's more expensive to live in Hong Kong because of accommodation. But yes, it is still a more opportunistic way to make money in Hong Kong. Secondly, my mum is quite elderly now. She's in a nursing home. My dad passed away 2 years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, it's okay. It's been 2 years. And I did ask my mom, she was with me in New Zealand too, so she's a New Zealand citizen. I did ask whether she wants to move back with me, but her life is now in Hong Kong. Her favorite restaurant, her favorite hairdresser. Yeah. So it's kind of hard.
It's hard to make changes when you're very old.
Yes, she's 85. Yeah. It's very hard. It's very, very hard. And that's another point that makes depression. Depression or mental health is a lot to do with all the stress. And the stress in Hong Kong can come from finance because Hong Kong is not an easy city to live, especially with the high accommodation costs. And then on the other hand is family. I would say family in a way that in Chinese, there's this philosophy that the children must look after and must obey one's parents. I think my husband said it's part of Confucianism. That is the teaching of Confucius that you must, there is an English word for it. It means to look after and to respect your parent. But I was considered a black sheep of the family, by the way. I love my parent. I respect them. However, I don't think they're always right. I was one of those child that even in class, I would raise my hand and tell the teacher, sorry, what you wrote on the board is wrong.
Do you think you were rebellious?
I don't think I was rebellious.
Just
I was
outspoken or confident?
When I was in Hong Kong studying, no, I wasn't because I was taught not to. But when I was in New Zealand and the States,
you found your voice.
I found my voice and I was appreciated by that. My teacher would say, oh, thank you, Christina, for pointing that out. I missed that. It was the best validation and the best way to kind of encourage me to find out what is right and what is the truth rather than just listen. Yeah. Because when I was growing up in Hong Kong in the 1970s and 80s, the way of teaching was thus what they call the stuffing method. Think of foie gras. All the children were like ducks or geese.
We call it chalk and talk.
Oh, chalk and talk. Okay. Yeah. Basically, don't talk, just copy, just do as you're told. Don't do as I do, but do as I say. So I kind of felt like a lot of Chinese kids might feel, not just kids, Chinese people might feel a bit of more pressure from the family than Westerners. Not all Westerners have the same culture, but in general, I guess most Westerners, when kids turn 18, bye-bye, go off to college. And if you really need money, maybe I can help you, but I don't expect you to look after me and I don't expect to have to look after you.
That's pretty true, I think.
Yeah, and then you see each other Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, weddings, funerals. But pretty much you have separate lives. But in Chinese culture, the family is a very large part of life. You're expected to look after your parents and you're expected to respect your parents. I remember when I was young, I have to call everyone who's older than me by their title before I can eat. Like in every dinner, it's like dad, mom, big sister, second sister, da 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 da. And by the time I finish, I think the meal is half through.
See, that's so interesting. In my culture, I didn't even have to call my aunties and uncle auntie and uncle. I could just call them by their first name.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's
so different.
It is. It's very different. So I think there's another burden that Chinese might feel is that whether it's instinctive or whether it's built into them, is that they kind of felt they have to look after their parents.
Yeah. And do you think that can add to mental health issues or at the very least stress?
Exactly. I completely agree because right now I'm feeling the massive of it because as you know, when people grow old, they actually turn back to be a toddler.
Yeah, the roles are reversed.
Exactly.
You parent your parents, don't you?
Well, I've always parented my mom. When I was young, she used to ask me, oh, Christina, what can we do? How should we survive? She wasn't really looking for actual advice from me, but that's just how she kind of expressed that we were in problems. But anyway, now that she's 85, she's still relatively sane. It's just that she's becoming very more childlike. She must have this now, but physically she's half deaf, she's half blind, she's in a wheelchair. So it's a lot of stress.
A lot of responsibility for you.
Because my mum only had me. Although I had siblings from my dad's side, my mum only had me.
You're the only one.
Oh, there's another advice I have. If anyone's considering having children, have at least 2.
Yes. My daughter's an only child as well, and she's already dreading my old age and the fact that she's the only one.
But that's another thing. I mean, I kind of really appreciate in Western culture, you know how when people grow old, they move into nursing home. Like, the nursing home is not like Hong Kong. At least the ones that I saw in New Zealand, where you can either buy or rent a room or an apartment or even a house in a nursing home complex.
And it can be a lovely lifestyle,
yeah,
can't it?
Be.
Where you're
you
very
have your
well
own
looked
house
after.
in a community.
Garden,
exactly.
Can get together and have Zumba classes with people and play bingo.
And you have an emergency button that if you need, they will come and the
that
nurse
doesn't
comes.
exist in Hong Kong, does it, really?
Not that I know of. I think the rich, they would not go into a nursing home anyway. They can afford to have the nursing team live in their own mansions, in the house. My mom's already in a private nursing home where she has her own room. They feed her, they help her, all that. But still, I've seen some really poor nursing homes. It's worse than boarding.
And this comes back again to the government not putting money where it could be really used to improve facilities.
Exactly. They spend so much money on the white elephant projects. Oh, that's another whole different
That's a whole new podcast.
Yes, that's another one. But like I said, the support of your elderly parents is a big weight on me because maybe people don't point their fingers at me to say that you're not looking after your mum right. But every now and then I would hear my mum say little things like, oh, Christina, I know you're doing your best, and I know I shouldn't listen to other people saying that you should live with me, blah, blah, blah. My mum is always like...
A little bit of manipulation and pressure.
Oh, I grew up with emotional blackmail. I didn't learn about the emotional blackmail term until I went to my counselor when I was back in Hong Kong 20 years ago. That's because when I reiterated episodes with my parent that I understood whether she was doing it intentionally or unintentionally.
Probably not.
I think my parents love me very much the way that they know how to.
A lot of time our parents kind of parent the way they were parented.
Exactly.
So it's a knock-on effect from history, isn't it?
Yes.
It can be.
It's a vicious cycle.
You were saying that the stress of Hong Kong, the fast-paced city, the cost of living here, which is very high, and also we didn't mention, but a lot of people live in very small quarters in Hong Kong, and the pressure of having elderly parents can all add to your mental health or your well-being. What else triggers you or causes you to have depression, do you think?
I think, well, maybe not specifically for me, but I consider that other factors that affect mental health issue could be peer pressure or social stigma, is that a lot of times when I was spending more time overseas, I had secondment times where I was living in New Zealand for 6 months or spending times in Taiwan. I kind of felt so carefree because you don't have to fit into a certain mold when you live in that community. You can be different.
So you feel there's real social pressure here to be a certain way and to act in a certain way and to make money or compare yourself to others, things like that.
I totally feel that. Maybe not so much as you must, but things on the media, things you see around in magazines and billboards, what's on TV, everything kind of projects what is an ideal life. If you don't have that, you should work towards it. And then I kind of feel like there's a never ending of wants. It's always you have to strive to earn more. But imagine when I was in New Zealand or when I was in Taiwan, it felt like it's okay to be without these things. These things, you don't really need them. So I think partly in that, even though you might not be told that you need this, but just overall society, the atmosphere kind of just make you feel you're lacking something.
And I think that that's really a global issue, that there's people all over the world striving for more and wanting more and never feeling like they have enough or that they are enough. But do you think that it's a greater issue in Hong Kong than other places?
I think in a way, because like you brought up, we do live in very tight quarters, not just in terms of the homes, but in terms of amount of space for each person in Hong Kong per se. You're always with other people. You don't have much personal space. And you're always bombarded by not just the media message, but you see other people's life more. You're like, it's up front, up close, in your face. Whereas in New York, for example, yes, there are lots of things that pushes materialistic things. But however, there are places like the Village where there are a lot of hippies.
And the Bronx where there are poor people and
exactly.
things like that.
You kind of have more room. Maybe Hong Kong is because it's such a small can of fish.
And we're surrounded by such immense wealth here. There's huge, huge wealth.
Exactly. It's like, I can't believe how people can afford like a purse that's more than the money that I ever earn, or well, I ever have. My belief is I would never buy a wallet more than I can make. But people do, and you kind of feel like every now and then, maybe if there's one person do it, you say it's that person. But when everyone you know do it, you might not subconsciously, but consciously you might think that, oh, am I
lacking? It's interesting, isn't it? It's almost a subconscious pressure that we're not even aware of.
And also because that in Chinese culture, or at least in Hong Kong culture that I know of, is you were never encouraged to be individualistic. We're not as bad as Japan.
It's a rat race, isn't it?
Yes. In Hong Kong, you were not taught or encouraged to be your own person in a way. You were kind of always brought up to be good, to mold into the doctor, the lawyer, the architect. Whereas I think in overseas, in Western society, people appreciate the difference of people. Like, oh, you're an artist, great. You're great with your hands, so be a mechanic. But in Hong Kong, you kind of feel like, if I'm not the same as other people, there must be something wrong.
And that comes back again to cultural differences, doesn't it?
I think so. And another thing I think is it's very confusing growing up in Hong Kong. Even if I have never left in Hong Kong, I think I would kind of feel, like I said, it's too much of the East and West culture. It's a fusion, the new word.
It is.
It's a fusion of culture in Hong Kong. But however, fusion can be done nicely or can be done, disaster.
Well, I guess, and when you're talking about that, that's with the fusion of the East meets West in Hong Kong. The East is seeing what they have in the West and vice versa, and there's jealousy or there's confusion of values or there's a mixture and intermingling of priorities, and that adds a whole new pressure. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
I mean, imagine when you do fusion well is when you take the best of both worlds and mix it up. But fusion can be done disastrously when you take the bad things of both worlds. And I have seen some families or some, different aspect of life. Sometimes they see something from West and they take that to Hong Kong, but they kind of have to mold it to fit into Hong Kong. And the molding part, it's like even food-wise, like the milk tea, for example, the British milk tea. Hong Kong does milk tea completely different. Sometimes it can be very good. Sometimes it can be disastrous. So I think in a way, like I said, having this kind of ever-molding, ever-confusing environment doesn't help one's building up of an identity, having beliefs. Belief is another thing in Hong Kong. A lot of people are religious. I am too. I'm Christian. But a lot of people I know are also atheists. And I think it's a way that they don't feel belong to anything. That's another thing that can lead to stress, or without faith, you can't really have the support. I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but the first time I ever experienced unconditional love was when I became a Christian. I mean, whether it was just something my husband believed was just psychological or subconscious, or whether it's something true, is that I do feel like I now have a much stronger base that I can rely on.
And you know what? If that works for you and makes you feel better and happier and less depressed, then that's brilliant, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of those Christian, I'm quite open. Like, I have some Christian friends who dislike other religions. But to me, if something teaches you to be good and helps you to go through life, it's good.
And I think that's something else. Hong Kong is so diverse. You've got so many different cultures here, so many different religions, so many different sexual orientations, so many different gender types. We've got everything. It's a real melting pot. And I think that's one of the exciting things about Hong Kong, but that can also be something that creates pressure and conflict and things like that as well.
I totally agree. Like, I think in the States, maybe you can arguably say that that's even bigger melting pot. But however, in the States, you've got the room to be diverse. As in, like in San Francisco, you're probably more, modern and contemporary, whereas in the East Coast or in the South, where you're more conservative, you can kind of choose. You don't have to be head on with something that you don't agree with all the time.
You can't escape. It's so small again.
Exactly.
But having said that, I do think there's a level of tolerance and acceptance in Hong Kong, but that maybe comes back to your Chinese culture thing of just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
So maybe the acceptance isn't there, but it feels like it's there because there's no violence, there's no animosity. People treat each other with respect. It's interesting, isn't it?
I think a lot of it comes down to, like I said, it's a lot of talk, but not much action. I think there's a lot of tolerance, as in you're not as judgmental as in the States where there are a lot of protests. But nowadays, if you go on social media, you find that there's a lot of group where people are very radical. They express hate, they express judgment and all that. But however, on the surface, everybody's very tolerant and there's no
It's very
fire.
safe.
Exactly. However, if you go deeper to think that, are they actually really that accommodating to people's differences? Not really. Looking at the government's policies or different schools, I remember when I was young, actually not just when I was young, I just read an article earlier on saying that some school punished their student for wearing pants, even though it was only 10 degrees, because their school rules said that girls cannot wear pants.
Some of these rules are a little bit behind the times in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Exactly. But I would say that might not just be a Hong Kong thing. A lot of
it can be all over the place,
can't
can't it? And it comes down to individual organisations. Like there are certainly international schools here that would not be like that.
Oh, definitely. That might be one thing that I'm trying to get to, is that because of the physical smallness of Hong Kong and the dense population of Hong Kong, everything seems to magnify 100 or 1,000 times, especially when you're mentally unhappy. For example, when I was in one of my depression episodes, the noise, the lights, just feel I can't escape anywhere. It just feel like I just have nowhere to go. And my doctors explained to me that, yes, during the height of this certain crisis, you are very sensitive to light, blah, 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 blah. And I can't help but feel that if I was on a retreat, in Thailand.
You're on a farm in New Zealand.
That I would feel much happier. I would have room to, kind of relax. Whereas in Hong Kong, on my way to treatment, I get bombarded by all this. So it's not much I could do.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing that you've pointed out there that I'd never really considered, and it really does make sense. And I think that is a real cornerstone to perhaps why mental health issues do persist in Hong Kong. Do you think that there's a problem with people culturally being able to speak about them and ask for help if things are going wrong?
I think so. I would say that because, like I said, people seem to be more tolerant, but they weren't really taught how to handle such issues. I mean, if I had turned to my friends, really local friends, at the beginning of my depression, I don't think they would know how to react. To be honest, if it was the other way around, maybe I wouldn't know how. We weren't brought up with, when I was in Hong Kong anyway, or even when I was growing up in my family, how to handle mental disease. I mean, when someone's sick, you give them chicken soup, you give them more water and let them rest. But when someone tells you they have depression, then immediate there's silence that falls in the room. I'm sure there may be in other culture as well. Maybe with time goes on, people will become more educated and all that. I think it's getting better, but I think in Hong Kong, there's still a large gap of education about what mental health is about, so that they don't clump everything together as crazy, because it's different. Schizophrenia and depression is totally different.
They're all different, aren't they? Everything's completely different. And the way people respond to therapy or medication or what works for different people is all individual as well, isn't it? Do you do any sort of well-being or mindfulness activities to help your depression?
I've tried many different things throughout my 7 years of my journey to recovery. I think I've tried, there was this method called the journey, where you were brought to look at your inner self and all that. That was helpful for me. I'm not promoting the actual therapy.
Yeah, no, I know the one. Yeah, it's
but
good.
that was helpful for me to express the inner feelings that I never knew I had, to explore the inner self, which is something Chinese culture never really promote. You were always told just to conform, right? But anyway, that's something I tried. I totally believe in physical activities. I do Muay Thai, I do Pilates, I did yoga, I do swimming. I totally believe physical exercise helps a lot.
Because it helps the endorphins in your brain.
Exactly. And also a lot of coping skills that my team or professionals have helped me.
For example?
For example, now I notice some negative things that I do, like what they call mind reading. You always feel you know what other people are thinking. You're second judging yourself and all that. Or what they call fortune telling. You kind of feel like
predicting the worst.
Yes, exactly. Or disaster.
Disaster's coming.
Yes, exactly. Turning things out of proportion. And then on the positive side, I've learned things like little enjoyments that I can do. Think positively. I mean, I can't emphasize enough. Positivity is so important. And that is something I feel all my life I lack in my life because I was never given positivity from my parents. But nowadays, I try to give positivity for myself. I try to pat myself on the back every day, just say, okay, you helped an old lady cross the road today. Great.
Positive affirmations are so important and they can really help, can't
Yes,
they?
I try to do something with my husband is every day, I know we don't win the lottery every day or we're not on holiday every day, but every day maybe we can share with each other one happy thing that happened. Maybe say, oh, I had this best salad today. It was so yummy.
That's a really nice idea, though, for families, just to take the time for everyone to share one positive aspect of the day, even things like that. Sometimes people, I think as well, in Hong Kong in particular, they don't really sit down and take the time or connect because everyone's so busy, everyone's working late, parents are absent or away or busy, and children are with helpers and things like that. So that also plays into it as well, doesn't it?
I totally agree because I have the saying about people in Hong Kong, we don't really live, we just survive. You're striving to earn more money. To do what? To earn more money. I think this whole idea of making a fortune and to leave it behind I don't know why. People don't stop to smell the roses.
It's so true. And that's what's lacking a little bit in this culture here in Hong Kong. Taking that time.
Exactly. But this is life in Hong Kong. That's what's been promoted as in you live a fast life. You have to accumulate mass wealth. So what? People don't continue that sentence. So, okay, you make lots of money, so. So, yes, I totally think that because of that fast pace and because of the little time that people take to enjoy life, that adds to the mental health problems.
I totally agree. Christina, what advice do you give to somebody dealing with depression?
First thing, I totally think you must seek help. Whether it's help from friends, whether it's help from professionals, don't worry about the stigma and don't think that it will go away. Like when you have a sore throat or when you have a fever, you wouldn't feel like, oh, I don't want people to know. Just sleep it off. Okay, some people might. But you wouldn't hesitate to go to a professional to seek help, right? Although Hong Kong in the general medical world may still have yet to be really spot on to spot mental disease, but I think they're getting there. And there are much more resources around with free counseling, hotlines and all that. I totally feel that whatever it is, seek help is the first thing.
And I think also don't judge yourself and don't feel like you don't deserve the help because everybody does deserve the help. And as low as you're feeling, you're not always going to feel that bad and there are ways to get support.
Exactly. But however, though, I have been through there and it's a kind of chicken and the egg. When you haven't been through it, you don't recognize the early symptoms. And when you haven't experienced it, normally by the time you actually feel it, you're already at the worst stage. And at that point, it's really up to the people around you to help you seek help. Like my husband, who took me to my counselor when I was having this detrimental episode that I could hardly leave the bed.
See, that's really, really wise advice. So really for families and friends, keep your eye on other people. And if you feel concerned, ask them if they're okay and help them get support.
Yes, exactly.
Very, very good advice. Really good advice.
Yes, because I remember, even though I've had counseling on and off for the earlier years of my life, I didn't recognize that I was going down that road again, and I was on the verge of, that I need medical help then. I thought I would just need someone to talk to every now and then. Like I said, when you're at that moment, you can't see that you can get help, and that's when others need to step in.
And if you could go back and speak to your younger self, what would you say to her?
It's okay. You are good.
Ah, see, you're always good.
Yes, you're already very good. That's one thing I would say.
Brilliant. Well, Christina, thank you so much for meeting with me today. This has been such an amazing conversation, so enlightening, so interesting, and I really think we got to the heart of a lot of things about mental health issues in Hong Kong that I hadn't even considered, and I've lived here for 18 years. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me here. I just hope I didn't get off the tangent too much.
No. When we went off the tangents, it was super interesting.
Great. I've got much more in the pot. We can talk later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.